Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, including books. And honestly, a lot of times mostly books, and it is another book-themed video today. It is a tag video! Specifically, it is the mid-year freakout tag! Alright, so let's go to the short intro, and when we come back, we'll get into the tag. Welcome back, guys! I am so excited to catch up with you guys and talk about how my year has been in terms of reading. How has you guys' year been going with reading? I kind of want to give a big shout out to Kayla from Books and Lala because she actually tagged the creators of this tag, because every year I see tons of people doing the tag, but I never know who created it, and I didn't see a lot of people tag the people who created it, so Books and Lala did, and I will tag them as well. So, special shout out to Kayla for, letting us know who created it, because it's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle over the years, I feel like. And also another thing that she does that I really like, we're talking about Kayla still, I love that she adds in, like, a question like, how is your overall reading year going? And she adds in other little things. So I'm kind of going to do this in her style a little bit, and talk about how my year in general is going. I think my year is going great. I have really been just knocking it out of the park with my reading goals. Specifically, if we look at my reading journal for 2024, which I'm really proud of, by the way, I can tell you that I've actually met a lot of my goals. So I have already read 25 non-horror books. I think I'm almost at 30 if I look at my spreadsheet, which, by the way, I will record my screen so that you guys can see my spreadsheet too. So let me do that. Okay, here we go. Here is my screen, and this is my little tab for all the non-horror that I've read so far, and the total is 32, which is really great so far. I'm very happy about that number, I gotta say. So yeah, lots of non-horror books, and especially if you include some middle grade, some nonfiction, some dark fantasy randomly, some random YA that wasn't exclusively horror, so lots of variety, and I love that. So I also have been reading more from Robert McCammon, which was one of my goals, reading more by the romance author Sarah Hogel. I did read 2 more books from her a couple of months ago. So I also have goals on my spreadsheet. If we look at my main page, my goals page, I had a challenge to do the Read What You Own challenge and get to 50 books. I've already done that. In fact, I started last November, but I've gotten to over 50 if we count since last November. But if we just count this year, starting in January, of course, I got to 55 books that I've read that I own, which is great. So I've already accomplished that, and I'm trying to keep track for the rest of the year. And I am on track to do my 24 books to read in 2024. I've got 2 of those lists, and I'm on track to read, if I keep up with this same pace, to read all of the books by the end of the year, because on my 24 paperbacks from hell to read in 2024, I have read 12 of my 24, so exactly half at halfway in the year. Same thing with my regular other 24 books to read in 2024. I have read 12 of the 24. So very, very happy with the progress there, and I hope I can continue so I can accomplish it. If we look at the year stats page, you can see that I have read 112 books, over 30,000 pages read, which is on track to be my best reading year ever. I did have a slow month in March. I read only 9 books, whereas every other month was above 10, so in the double digits. I am really happy with my variety of books in terms of how many I've read that are adult versus children versus middle grade versus YA. You could see I have 75 adult books read. I have 8 children's books that I read, 15 middle grade, 14 YA. My decades of books published, that is also very varied. I have read quite a lot from the last 3 years, so from the 2020s, well actually the last 4 years, I'm sorry. I've read 16 from the 2010s, 11 books from the 2000s, 23 books from the 90s, 21 books from the 80s, 5 books from the 70s, a book from the 60s, and a book from the 1800s. I think that is incredible. I just love seeing the scope of the different decades that I dip into. I love that. I am a big audiobook reader, it looks like, this year in terms of other years. So I have read 80 books using audio out of the 112 books total. So, make of that what you will. I'm in my audiobook era. I have accepted it. It just is the way it is. So yeah, there's also a good mix of genres and subgenres, which I'm very happy with as well. So yeah, on my stats page, everything is just looking very, very awesome, and I'm excited. Alright, so best book that I've read is the next question, and this is so hard! I am going to be releasing a top 10 reads of the year so far, literally in just a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. I will have 10 books that I gave 5 stars that I love, but if I had to just pick one, which I'm not going to do, I'm going to pick more than one, but if I just had to pick a few, and not give you 10 right here and now, I will tell you that, of course, I really loved Bunnicula. I read the whole series this year, and thanks to Amy from Amy Noel Reads, because she put this on my radar, and I'm so glad I finally dug into it, because it's the cutest little middle grade series or children's series of all time. It's adorable. I love it so much. And I gotta say, this is probably really high up there with being my favorite book of the year so far. I read The Light at the End by Skip Inspector. It's technically classified as the first splatterpunk book, but when you compare it with splatterpunk of today, it's really actually not like extreme horror of today. So I kind of really like this. It was different than I thought it would be, and I'm really sad because look, it's falling apart. My old copy. I was so happy to have this old copy, and it's trashed. After actually using this to read, because I read physically, but I also listened along to audio as I read, and it's just falling apart because I actually used it this year to read, and it's just like even the cover's breaking off, but hey, it kind of looks alright. Barely. At least the front cover didn't fall off, but still. This is definitely a favorite. This is a unique vampire story. Really gritty depictions of old school 80s New York in here, the subways, and oh, so awesome. Also, apparently, rumor is, I've seen online, and I think my friend Andrew told me, that the vampire that is in this book, our main vampire antagonist, is actually the basis for the character of Spike from Buffy. And when you see Spike in a particular episode of Buffy where he's like shown in the 80s where he's battling with an old school Slayer in the subway, it really feels like a scene from this book. It is crazy. I just love it. I could see how this character inspired Spike, just the way it was written a little bit, but this character is a lot worse than Spike. So I like Spike a lot more because Spike has a heart, kind of, technically, kind of has a soul, even though he doesn't at the end of the day. But yeah, if you watch Buffy, you know what I mean. But this is such an entertaining vampire book, and I don't even care about vampire books, so that's how much I like this one. I don't usually dig vampires in general, but this one, it hooked me in. Next question, best sequel that I've read so far. I also have 2 answers for this because I read all the sequels to Bunnicula and I liked every single one. So there are 7 total books, which means 6 sequels after this book, and I love them all. I gave them all 5 stars, but I could not shout it out. It's like the cutest series ever. Thank you again to Amy for telling me about it and really just touting the series so much that I could not pick it up. And the other answer, it's kind of a sequel, but it's not a pure sequel. It definitely has a character from the first book. The first book is The Wolf's Hour, and the sequel of sorts, but not really. It's more of a collection of stories that has the same main character as The Wolf's Hour. It's called The Hunter from the Woods by Robert McCammon, and we're following our character Michael, who can turn into a werewolf, but he's also a soldier of sorts and helps fight against the Nazis. But The Hunter from the Woods explores lots of different times of his life, before and after the events of The Wolf's Hour, which again is kind of like the book that this is based off of in a way, in terms of that same character from The Wolf's Hour is in The Hunter from the Woods. So I'm counting that as a sequel, but if you want to argue with me, that's fine. Next, my favorite reread. This is kind of cheating. It's the only book I've reread this year, which is Eclipse, because I'm doing a buddy reread with my friend Andrew of the entire Twilight series, and we started last year. So we reread Twilight and New Moon last year. We both reread Eclipse in May. And honestly, Eclipse was actually my least favorite of the Twilight books. So I say it's my favorite reread, but I really only reread this, so there's nothing else to like compare it to or for this to compete against. So it is what it is. It was still a ridiculous fun time to revisit, and I definitely feel a little bit differently about this book when you compare it to how I felt about it when I was a teenager reading this, but it was still a good time and such a fun walk down memory lane. A genre that I've been loving or reading the most, of course, the genre that I always read the most of is horror. I love horror, whether that be new release horror or vintage horror. You could see from the stats I gave that I have been reading very diversely when it comes to decades, and that's on purpose. I'm very aware and cognizant of the decades I'm reading from, because I don't want to just read new releases, but I don't want to just read Paperbacks from Hell or whatever you want to call it, vintage horror alone. I want to have a nice mix so I could be a well-rounded, well-versed reader, and so I have accomplished that. So I'm reading all kinds of horror, not just one kind of horror, which to me is very important. But when it comes to something that I'm enjoying that is surprising to me is romance, because I started dipping my toe into romance last year, and I've dipped my toe a little bit more into it this year, and I'm really having such a great time. It's surprising to me how many romance books that I'm loving, especially more modern romance, more slow burn romance. I feel like I have now discovered the types of romances mostly that I enjoy. Next, new release book that I haven't read yet, but I want to. And this one's a very easy answer, but I'm saving this book, and it hurts. It's hard to save it. It's really hard. It hurts to wait. Road Trip Rewind, and this is by Kate and Danny Temporelli, and I already read this year their other book, The First Date Prophecy, and I loved it. 5 stars. Such a cute little rom-com, heavy on the com, and I liked that, but also a very cute, charming romance with lots of hints of nostalgia woven throughout this book. I think this one will be even more nostalgic because this actually, the characters I believe go back to the year 1999, whereas this was set in modern times, but there was still like lots of nostalgic references because one of the characters was a child star from the 90s. So that's why this one's nostalgic, and this one's going to be nostalgic because they literally go back in time from what I understand from the premise on the back of the book. It's not a spoiler. So yes, I would love to dig into this. I pre-ordered this. I freaking love the cover. Look at it. It looks so good, especially next to the other one. Look at the colors. And look at the covers themselves. So nice. But yeah, I'm gonna wait till next April for my readathon Old School April. I guess it's gonna be hard to wait, but it's gonna be worth it because this one really had all the nostalgic vibes. It was perfect for Old School April. So if you don't know about Old School April, again, it's my readathon, watchathon, activity-a-thon that is surrounding all things nostalgic, 80s, 90s. You don't have to read old school things, but you can. All the prompts are just basically based on nostalgia, and it is a competitive readathon, and the teams are based on nostalgic things. It's a lot of fun, and no matter what kind of reader or watcher, if you like movies, no matter what kind of person you are, what kind of taste you have, I think you can join in and have fun. So this will be saved for next April, but I really do want to read it, but I'm gonna wait. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This for me is also an easy answer. I really want to read the new CJ Lead book, and I believe it's called American Rapture. I read last year Mayfly, and I was blown away. I loved it. It was 5 stars. I loved being in Maeve's head. She was so twisted. But more importantly, I really liked CJ Lead's writing style as an author. So I'm so excited to dig into her next book, American Rapture, and I am eagerly awaiting. I believe it comes out in October, so I can't wait. And I'm sorry to go all negative, but here we go, biggest disappointment. So I have a couple of answers for this. Again, this is me going a little ham, going a little too negative, I suppose, but I would definitely say my 3 biggest disappointments of the year so far: Body Rides by Richard Lehman. Richard Lehman is not for everyone. He's usually for me, though, and the fact that Body Rides didn't work for me is very surprising and very weird and very disappointing because usually he's trash in a fun way, but Body Rides was just boring to me. I really hated the dialogue, the back and forth between the 2 characters, and it just did not deliver. So if I'm gonna read trash, I'd like it to be enjoyable trash at least, and Body Rides was not that. Second up, I also really disliked Project Hail Mary. I read that for a vlog where I was reading like my friend, and I really thought I would like Project Hail Mary. I thought there was a chance I could like it because of the things I've heard about the characters. However, the sense of humor did not mesh well with me. The one character I did really like, named Rocky, wasn't a big enough part of the story to save the whole book for me. There was just too much science that went over my head, and I just couldn't get into it. So that was a little bit of a bummer, because I thought it could have been an unexpected win, perhaps. And last but not least, The Abyss is a wonderful, in terms of a wonderful looking paperback from hell reprint by Valancourt. And I bought it because the cover just looks so badass. But the cover is the best part of the book. Now, I did end up giving this a 2.5, rounded up to 3 for Goodreads, because the ending of the book was good, but there was a lot of boring, tedious passages that you had to get through to get to the end and to get to the good stuff. The essential story is, like, this town reopens the mine in the town, and weird things start to happen, including people just getting drunk, people almost losing all of their inhibitions, creatures are seen around the town, etc., etc. All sounds great. It just was not executed perfectly. Ugh, I wish it was better. Next up, my biggest surprise, like I said earlier, not to keep talking about Bunnicula, but I'll never stop at the same time. I'm going to keep talking about it. All the Bunnicula books were a huge surprise. I had a feeling I'd like them. I just didn't know that I would be obsessed with the Bunnicula books as much as I am. So yeah, that would be a huge surprise. Another surprise, and this is like the opposite of how I felt about Project Hail Mary. So I read Dark Matter for my Reading Like My Friend Kitty vlog over at the channel Spicy Cats Reads. Check out her channel. I had such a good time with Dark Matter. It blew me away, 5 stars. It was a book with science that I actually liked. It had wonderful character development and even had a romance that I enjoyed in it too. So Dark Matter was a huge surprise. I thought there was a chance of liking it, but I was hesitant, especially after my experience with Project Hail Mary. But it blew away all of my expectations, and it was way better than I expected. Favorite new author, and this could be a new-to-me author or a debut author. I mean, I don't know if they're my favorites because I only read one book by them, but I really loved Di Viola by Jennifer Thorne, so that's someone who I'm looking out for their other works. I've only read this, though, so I can't say it's a new favorite for me, but I loved that book. Also, I'm trying to think of others. Sarah Hoggle, because I read only one book from her like 2 years ago, but I read 2 more books by her this year and loved them. She could be a new favorite author because now that I've read 3 books total and have enjoyed all 3, I think she deserves to be called a favorite of mine. And I'm trying to think of other people. I know I've read another book by Patrick Lacey this year that makes 2 books total that I've read by him, so he could be on his way to becoming a favorite author, but he's not quite there yet. I've read my 3rd Ken Greenhall book this year. The 3rd one I read this year was Childgrave. Previously, I had read Elizabeth and Hellhound, loved both. So this 3rd book, also loved, gave 4.5 stars. So I think officially Ken Greenhall might be a favorite author of mine. Unfortunately, he's no longer around, but I still love his writing, and I'm trying to put off finishing all the work that's out there that exists that he's published, so we will see about that. But that's all I can think of for that particular question. Of course, you guys know, if you've been watching my channel, my all-time favorite author is Robert McCammon. I like a lot of R.L. Stine as well, so those are like long-time favorite authors, so not new to me favorite authors or anything, but there you go. New favorite character, and I'm so sorry to shout this out again, but the 2 main animal characters from these books, really, it's not Bunnicula who's the main character. He's in a couple of the books, but who's in every book is the main character, Harold, as well as Chester the cat. So Harold's the dog, Chester's the cat. Chester's all like a wise guy, thinks he knows it all. He's very kind of sophisticated and conceited, and he's always ragging on poor frickin' Harold. And Harold's just like a simple dog. He wants to have a good time. He wants to protect his little family, including the humans that they live with. And I don't know, their dynamic is so freaking cute. And I'm sorry I keep going on about this book. Okay, a book that made me cry. And this one definitely made me tear up. I'm holding 2 because these are 2 volumes, but it's also published as one book, Speaks the Nightbird. So this is Speaks the Nightbird Volume 1, Speaks the Nightbird Volume 2. Most people have read it as one volume, just Speaks the Nightbird. So this entire story is very engaging, very character-driven. We're following our main character, Matthew, who's freaking a clerk in the 1600s, which is a historical set novel. And I don't usually like historical fiction, but this one knocked it out of the park. Robert McCammon, as an author, is a freaking genius. How can someone make the 1600s seem exciting? Especially when it's a slow-paced, character-driven story. Somehow I was never, ever bored. And the very ending of Volume 2, so the ending of Speaks the Nightbird, there's some poignant stuff and poignant passages that really hit home and just made me tear up, and I just loved it so much. So this book, Speaks the Nightbird, is fantastic. Highly recommend if you don't mind a slow character-driven burn and you're just along for the ride and like a good mystery and like really fleshed out characters. I highly enjoyed that very much, and it made me emotional at times. A book that made me happy? I'm sorry. I'm not even going to talk about it, but yeah, all these books made me happy. But also The First Date Prophecy, which I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was talking about reading this for Old School April. It made me smile. It made me laugh out loud. Also, literally all the romance I've been digging into. The 2 Sarah Hoggle novels I read, Twice Shy was one, and You Deserve Each Other was another one. I liked Twice Shy more than You Deserve Each Other, but also I read some Irish books during St. Paddy's Day month, which of course is March, and one of the books I read was The Carnival at Bray. It had some romance in it, and it was emotional. Like, there was some sad parts, but there was some really heartwarming parts that made me happy. Not like happy as in haha happy, but just, it was just a endearing, heartfelt read. I can't explain it. It was like a sweet and poignant coming of age story, and I love those types of stories. So when I finish, it was just a good feeling because I was like, oh, those are the kind of books I really love. And the fact that it had like an Irish flair to it because parts of it was set in Ireland, I extra loved that. So there you go. All right, next question, the most beautiful book that I've bought or received this year, and I'm only going to talk about books that I was either sent by the publisher or that I bought that are newly published books. We cannot get into my favorite used books that I've found from used bookstores because we'd be here all freaking day. And I'm not going to count books from friends because a lot of my friends have sent me some amazing used books that I've loved, so we're not going to go through those either because, again, we'll be here all day, and this video is already long. But first, I was sent Knock Knock Open Wide. I think I was sent this year. I know I read it this year. I just can't remember if it was sent to me this year, but I love the cover to this one. I do think it's, quote, beautiful for like a horror book. And also, the inside is really, really, really good. Like, the story itself was a good read for me. And a thematic read, another read that I read during March for St. Paddy's Day. Sabbath of the Fox Devils, I bought this in anticipation of reading it during Old School April because it has a nostalgic flair, because they say it's a part homage to the small creature feature horror films of the 80s like Ghoulies, Gremlins, The Gate, and part splatterpunk take on a Goosebumps book. And I definitely saw those elements within the book, but this book was a lot deeper than I even expected, so it was a surprise. Like, I could have named this as one of my big surprises because it hit even harder than I thought it would, and it was an even bigger hit than I thought it would be. So, love this, but look at this wonderful cover. It's one of my favorite covers in terms of books that I bought this year. I bought this one from Valancourt. This is Blind Voices, and look at this. I love a good carnival-themed book. This one definitely has a carnival-themed cover. I'm hoping to read this in September when I'm going to be doing a Patreon carnival readathon. Another book I was sent for review from Tor Nightfire, Diviola. I love this cover. It's one of my favorite newer released book covers because, I don't always love new horror covers. I think they can be a big miss when you compare them to the old school crazy vintage covers that exist, but this is one of the newer horror covers that I just adore. I think it's eerie and spooky, but in a subtle, kind of pretty way. And last but not least, I pre-ordered this. This is the novelization for Happy Birthday to Me, which is one of my favorite underrated horror movies that has a very interesting mystery to it and very unique kills. So I was very happy when I saw that this was going to be published as a novelization. And I love how this is a knife with a birthday candle. It's the coolest cover ever. It looks a lot like the VHS/DVD, which has like the same font. And look at the back. A birthday hat with like a lot of the characters. Yes, it's so good. It's so good. So those are my answers. What books do I need to read by the end of the year? All of the books. And I don't know if this is an official question or just one that Gabby Reads does and Kayla from Books and Lala do, but I really like that they do this. Favorite video or post you've done so far this year? For me, my favorite videos I've done, I've tier ranked every single Paperback from Hell that I've read. That was over 100 books, and I loved the way it came out. It was my very first tier ranking video. Was very, very proud of that, and I was proud I was able to do it in way under an hour. Another one, I shopped my shelves for my April TBR. That was totally inspired by Cameron from Library Macabre shopping his shelves for Old School April as well, so he inspired me to do it for my TBR, and I love how it came out. Very proud of that one. And then my 2 copycat vlogs where I read like my favorite booktubers and authors. I did one on my favorite author, Mark Morris, where I read some of his favorite books, and I did one about my friend Kitty where I read some of her favorite books. I really loved how both of those came out, and I found some new favorites from both of those vlogs, and I'm very happy with that. And finally, I really loved how all of my Old School April vlogs turned out because I had lots of movie stuff, I had lots of activity stuff, some great food pictured in those vlogs, and of course some great reads. So really love how those vlogs came out, and those are my favorite videos. I'll link all them below, by the way, in case you haven't seen them and you want to. I would really love it if you took a second and checked them out. If you haven't seen them, you might enjoy them too. Who knows? Alright guys, those are my answers. I would love to know what you've been enjoying this year. What is your big standout read from this year so far? Let me know anything you want to in the comments below. Have you read any of the books that I have talked about today? If so, what did you think about it? I'm always up to hear everyone's opinions. If you just want to comment an emoji to tell me you were here, you can leave a little shark emoji for summertime because I love sharks. But guys, I gotta say, for this time though, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all so very much, especially when you take the time to watch a super long video like this one. So till next time, guys, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Bye, guys.